Hi, Simon.
Hi.
How's it going?
Great, how are you?
Good. Can everyone hear us? We're sorry your brother Nicky couldn't join us, but he's had some health issues, but he's okay, so we wish him well.
It's just me.
I always like to start out with a little art history, so I picked some things that I don't think influenced you, but which I see as ancestors, perhaps, to some of your works. Fantastic Creatures is one category in which that you all address, and there's this amazing sculpture in the Metropolitan Museum that's usually up by this French artist into the 19th century that's a chimera. And of course, chimeras and dragons and unicorns and all kinds of weird monsters have had a long history in the history of art. But I think what's interesting is that the artist who, at least in this case, this artist also has this really strong sensitivity to materials, and so I think the combination of that and your work is really interesting. And another one, this is a really weird one that's actually not by a well-known artist at all. We used to call it Yoda when I worked at LACMA after they acquired this, and it's by, but it's this really interesting, strange-looking hybrid creature of a sort of gnome-like that relates to this era of fantasy, also in ceramic. But of course, I think the real thing that I thought of with your work is Gaudi's amazing Park Güell in Barcelona, which of course is made with broken tiles, and it's sort of a fantastic lizard, and I think there's many parallels to your work. Do you know the work of Gaudi well?
I'm obsessed with Gaudi.
No, that's good. I picked the right slide then.
Yeah, particularly because my brother and I work in I'm more scientific, mathematical, surface-oriented, and he's very much about the forms and the animalistic side. And I think Gaudi actually was the two of us combined, and we have to come together in order to do stuff like that. But when I see Gaudi, particularly at the La Sagrada Familia, the way he hung his model upside down with sandbags is more kind of how I think. And then the lizard, for example, is much more my brother.
Right. Why don't you tell us how you and your brother came to work together as artists, designers? We won't even worry about the categories because who cares about categories?
I was a struggling painter, and I had studied architecture also, so I had a background in some of it, and my brother was a house manager. And he was commissioned just to make a few very basic furniture pieces, and he asked me to do CAD drawings for him, and then we decided to work together. And I did it kind of begrudgingly, actually, because I wanted to keep on painting and cooking also. But it worked out, so I'm glad that I agreed to do it. But it really started out sort of as cabinetry manufacture, and very quickly, I think both of us couldn't just do that. It's not in our nature to just make a square working cabinet.
When did you first sort of realize that you could have a go of this together as brothers, like working collaboratively?
We talked about it in 2009. I mean, really, we've been working together since we were kids. And we would build tree houses together. We used to carve stone together because my dad was a stonemason.
And an artist, too.
And an artist, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so the two of us were always doing projects together. We parted ways when I went to school, and then when we wound up in LA, it just kind of happened naturally.
And that was about 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was in 2010s when we officially formed.
Yeah,
I know, kind of recent.
Yeah, that's pretty recent.
It still feels new.
Can you talk, so your dad's an artist, you guys are both into music, really seriously, I know.
Yeah. And
you grew up, from what I know, in this fairly interesting milieu in Austin, around artists, filmmakers. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, my mom was an opera singer and a screenwriter, and she was living in LA right up until we were very young as a screenwriter. So she knew all kinds of really interesting people, and my older brother is an actor, and he also did. So we kind of grew up in a house where, I don't know if anyone knows Philip Mall, but he's a concert pianist. He was like playing piano in our house, and then I called Terrence Malick Uncle Terry, for example, which is really crazy because later on I became a fan of his films. I had no idea.
Right.
And so
he was around a lot when you were growing up?
Yeah, we were surrounded by really crazy people.
Yeah.
And so I think we just grew up with that as our guide, basically. And our mom was singing opera. My dad painted. Nobody knew how to do anything financial, anything responsible at all, and I'm still kind of figuring that out. But it's like, we were pretty fluent in how to be expressive.
But your brother wanted to be a hockey player, if I
Yeah.
have that correct, and he did play hockey. And then you wanted to be a painter.
Well,
right?
it's funny. He was the rebel by trying to do sports and, and like
Right.
hold down a job, basically. So he was being rebellious by being a hockey player, and he was really good at it.
Yeah.
And he played drums, and I was a cook and then tried to paint, and that's like that was very, very conservative for my family, a very like accepted thing to be doing, which is funny.
I think I have noticed in my career in dealing with artists that many artists are great cooks. It's interesting. And I think it's because they know how to make stuff with their hands. And it's also, a lot of art is about transformation. And that's sort of what cooking is.
I think it's just a sensitivity to, art is a combination of observation and being able to just translate something through your fingers, I think. And I mean, if I have a skill that I would talk about, it's the ability to like feel stuff with my fingertips and manipulate things. And also to observe. So I think if anything that has to do with that, I can kind of at least get kind of good at.
And so that manifests itself early in your life as cooking, most of the fingertip thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I understand what you mean really well.
Yeah, like knife work. I mean, if you watch a sushi chef, they're incredible with their knife, and I think a lot of it is learned, but they probably have kind of a predisposition to be able to do that also.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And definitely for me, I love to like feel stuff and. Like I love beadwork.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. I wanted to just show one more slide of the art history. It's not really, it's pop culture history, but surely Dr. Seuss, and you knew all about this when I put this up, so maybe you can talk about these a little bit. We all know Dr. Seuss, right?
This book was really important to me. I think that Oh, the Places You'll Go was important, and the Lorax. And the Lorax was my first understanding of deforestation and how sad that is. And I just loved him. I loved that he's like a spirit of the woods. And I think Nikki and I are kind of into animism, just that everything has kind of a spirit anyway. So he's like a really good. He was my first understanding of that. Plus the truffula treetops just.
What are they called?
Truffula trees.
Oh, okay.
I think so. Does anybody want to correct me on that? I think that's
Do you feel
what they're
like
called.
that just seeped into your unconscious, and it all comes out in your work now?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, there are very striking visuals. Not that you're not copying him, but it's.
No, but it is really similar, and it's so weird. Like when I read, I have a nephew now who's 1.5 years, and I read Dr. Seuss to him, and I just have no idea where he came up with his weird rhymes. And I mean, it's like dark, but also just. Incredible. He always throws in some darkness, which I think makes it even more special.
Yeah.
Because it's real.
Yeah.
But it's really beautiful.
And then this high-keyed color palette is also very striking.
It's pretty wacky.
Yeah. I mean, it's not non-naturalistic. I think we can say that for sure. Great. So now we'll show some of your work.
Okay.
I thought we could talk about the accretions. There was a quest to ask specifically about this technique that you developed, and then this is also related to the work you're doing at the embassy in Niger.
Yeah,
if I
exactly.
have it right. So.
I think this is a great example of when Nikki and I come together to make something, because the shapes are entirely his, and I was the materials researcher for this.
How does he come up with the shapes?
Very sexual. He always says that he has not had very many sexual partners, and I have, so I don't have to express it through my art. And he expresses so I'll speak for him and say that.
Okay.
You can see the sexual forms, and we also name them after. Call them fathers and mothers, and there's certain. They're just very sex organic. And also kind of underwater creature. He has a real talent for making an inanimate object feel like it's
alive.
Got some,
something. Yeah, got
exactly.
Some energy.
Even if it doesn't reference something.
Does he draw the form first before it's translated into 3 dimensions? Does he just draw with like pencil and?
Yeah, now he uses an iPad because I kind of forced him to, because otherwise I have to do the archiving, and I like it to be digital. But yeah, he'll draw with anything, And
Right.
his drawings look a lot like Dr. Seuss. They're very cartoony.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we present a drawing to a client, or like if we're doing a show presentation, it takes a big leap of faith on the part of the other person to let us do it, because it really looks like a cartoon from the beginning.
Right. So talk about the translation. So he comes up with the drawing in the form, and then you talk about your materials research for this technique.
So this material, like I said, I'm just obsessed with touching stuff, and I also like to read about everything that I'm interested in. So as soon as I started to work with clay, I actually used to live in our studio, so I had the luxury of being there all night long when no one was around. And I was just sitting there with some slip, which is very wet clay, and an old, like leather hard clay vessel that had been thrown by somebody else. And I sat there and I was just thinking, if I brush this forever, it's gonna do something. I know that it'll self-organize. Like the clay will pack somehow, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. That just came kind of from observing how quickly dry clay sucks up water. And I was like, I know that it's going to kind of attach to it. And I was thinking about caves a lot at the time, and I wanted to make sort of a handmade cave structure, basically. So the first pieces didn't look like this. They just were a texture on a very basic looking vessel. But I continue to be really obsessed with self-organization, and that literally
like the way nature might organize itself.
Yeah, that every material has a way of packing.
Right.
And
like crystals or whatever.
Yeah, there's always some way that stuff packs. Like spheres do it really perfectly, but if it's not a sphere, it's going to do something
like
really strange.
Together,
yeah. So the way this is done is actually just over and over a bottom to top brush onto a clay surface, and thousands of layers later it has kind of grown these fingers. So
it's literally a question of brushing thousands of times to build that up. Yeah.
And the shapes are completely determined by nature. I know the person it's like human aided cave growth, basically. And the inconsistencies in the person's brushstrokes will cause some things to happen, but they always kind of self-correct, which is interesting. And the reason they're pointing down like that is that we brush bottom to top. If you brush top to bottom, they point up.
Oh, right. Have you done ones that do that?
Yeah, but I like this.
Oh, you prefer this?
Yeah.
Does it reach? I assume it reaches like a breaking point, or for like.
There's a limit.
There's a limit to what you
it's
can
like
do.
1.5 inches is a limit.
Okay.
These are pretty far out in many ways.
Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely a limit. I've done it with wax, and there's no limit, but there's something about ceramic that the fact that it's so fragile and useless as a vessel is also exciting to me.
Do you just fire these once then?
No, these are fired 3 times. The ones that have gold are fired 3 times. Otherwise, we do 2 firings. One's a bisque firing, and then we do a glaze fire.
Okay. And how many of these would you say you've made, or do you?
I don't know. We make. It depends year by year. They all look different too. This collection is like a 1.5 years old, I think, or maybe 2 years old. And the current ones look not as fantastic.
So when you first started making these, were you doing them yourself? And then talk about like getting a studio practice developed with the sisters. Obviously, to ramp up production, you have to have help. And
exactly.
You're directing this technique that you developed yourself.
Exactly. So a lot of my processes are really crazy making, and like Nicky, if I teach him to do it, he stops after 2 hours. He can't do it anymore.
Right. So you have very different temperaments that
completely,
way.
Yeah. And I sort of need that methodical thing. I need to just be brushing clay.
It's like, is it like
something.
Zen-like for you? Is like meditation, sort of mindfulness?
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm like going crazy.
It's good you found this.
I know. Now it's beads, so that's good.
Right, okay.
And they take even longer than this does. So this process actually, I taught it to Roan Flores, who works in our studio, and she's now the only person who ever does it because she has the perfect hand and the perfect temperament for doing it. I mean, honestly, if I were doing it for this long, I would also probably be tired of it. But she's obsessed. She really loves it, and it's interesting. Not just anybody could get them to grow as long as they do. If you leave the brush on for too long, the brush will dry onto the petal or whatever. I don't know what they're called, petals, and it'll pull it right off. And if you press too hard, they also break. So it's such a specific thing, and she's the expert.
If it breaks, is there a way to fix it, or do you
No.
have to? Oh, so you have to do it right.
Yeah.
There's all the technique. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't really touch it afterwards either.
So you feel like she can do it better than you can?
Oh, for sure.
'Cause
I actually tried to do it again recently, and I wasn't so
The
good
painter
at it.
Marilyn Minter once told me, she's like, the people in my studio can paint better than I can. She's like, I invented something, but then they can do it better. It's interesting. So.
Well, I'm interested in making a seed of something that doesn't require me to even exist anymore. Like I want to have a process that is exactly the same as when I first made it, where it doesn't matter who's making that.
Right.
Now, Nicky, on the other hand, it has to come directly from his hand, and that's another way we're really different, because he's not so process oriented, and his like, what I don't know what it is. His physicality is what makes our art have its spirit.
Let's see. Okay, let's look at more images. These are more accretions, right? Are these a different era?
Those are from the same sort of era as the last set. And this is when we were trying to make them look like they were kind of popping these gold things out of them. Very strange. I mean, that one has like almost a bird poop kind of
right. How did
thing
you, so clearly texture is a real interest of yours, and you guys experiment with all these different kinds of textures. Sometimes you contrast them. These are clearly, but and sometimes you come up with completely different materials like fur and leather and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Let's skip so there's some more accretions, biomorphic. In nature, do you like look at natural forms, or do you just sort of,
all the time.
Yeah, like in nature, or do you look at?
Yeah, I mean, California is great because I can go to all kinds of different environments all the time.
Right.
But I really zone out on like a leaf. I'll sit there and look at the leaf for a long time.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you absorb it, I imagine that way. Yeah.
And I just wonder like how, I was in a cave actually in the giant forest in California about a year ago, and I was like, how does cave bacon form? I don't know if you guys know that, but it's like where it's this like, it looks like bacon that's hanging off of a cave.
Cave bacon.
Yeah.
I've never heard that term. Is that a real term?
Look it up. It's so cool.
It sounds amazing.
I like really want to make cave bacon, and I haven't figured it out yet, but
Oh no, I'm sure it will come. I'm sure. I would have guessed the succulents are appealing. Cacti.
Yeah, I love succulents.
Do you go to the Huntington?
It's
garden?
so great. Yeah.
It's so amazing.
The cactus garden's great.
It's incredible.
Those are great because they're so ordered. I mean,
Yes.
they look wacky, but they're still so ordered. I feel like if our artworks were a plant, it would definitely be a cactus.
Okay. Here's something different.
This is pretty wild. So
Yeah,
I was
this is
talking
pretty
about Nicky's sexual.
What's this called?
We call it a mega beast.
Okay. Okay.
Because it's a big
Yeah.
beast.
Yeah. In many ways.
And it's really big. I mean, this one's interesting actually because we're known for our creatures, and this is the only time we've ever done something like this. And this is sort of, I mean, Nicky would say that the beasts are portraits of either people or kind of emotional states, and they're very much about those gestures. If you look at this guy, he's a little cocky and.
Pun intended, I would say.
And he's imposing, and this came from a period in our studio where the two of us were kind of grappling with the quick success that we had, and I couldn't really handle it, and the two of us started fighting, and we had
because it was just 10 years ago. It was like that is fast. I mean,
it was fast.
Imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not that long ago.
I actually walked out of the studio halfway through this one, which was crazy. But so we were like really fighting, and I think that we were having an issue with our own egos, and this sort of has come to represent a manifestation of our ego, actually, to both of us.
I mean, interestingly, it has a somewhat classical pose. I mean, from art history, you could see if it was a human, you could see it a naked model posing for
Yeah, definitely.
Michelangelo or whatever.
I mean, it's
that.
it's an art pose, but it's when I look at it, I have like almost pain flashbacks. So it really is an intense piece, but very much looks like all of our work. But I think it's a good example of how much emotional and sort of situational stuff goes into every object. And as we keep going, the shapes morph, and they're a really accurate reflection of what our shared emotional state is.
So the materials here, the contrast between the softness of the fur and the hardness of the metallic, shiny brass, or I'm not sure what it is interesting to me, and that like gives these pieces in particular their character.
Yeah.
It also sharpens, it sharpens the genitalia, it sharpens the hands, it focuses the eye on these certain body parts. And
yeah, I mean, there's no ignoring it. This thing is so confrontational.
Yeah.
Even when I look at it in front of people, sometimes I'm like, oh no, I shouldn't be showing this.
Right. Well, because it uses a language that we're the soft, furry, stuffed animal language is a child language, and then you have this very, upfront, out there sexual part too.
Exactly.
Has anyone ever criticized you for that, or?
Yeah, I mean, people are like, does it have to have a penis on it, or like, why are you doing that? And but again, like that's actually, I think it's just part of being human. And I was talking about Dr. Seuss's throwing twisted stuff in there. If we just ignored all of that, then we wouldn't be being honest about our work. And I think that something interesting happens. It's why I think it's why making furniture that isn't furniture is interesting too. Is when you jam two things into each other, or if I take this glass and I say it's not a glass now, your mind starts going, well, what is it then? And I like that space. I like the sort of gray zone, or just a pairing of two things that shouldn't really be going together.
How did you come up with this particular combination of materials? And are those parts cast, like
cast,
lost wax cast?
They are. They're lost wax.
Yeah.
The horns are ebony. Those are hand carved. They're materials that Nikki loves using bronze and ebony, and for him wax is the best sculpting medium. Mm-hmm. So we'll actually make a wax and then directly cast it.
So he sculpts in wax, that's what he's working on.
Yeah, so bronze is a great medium for that. Mm-hmm. And then our dad carves the horns, which is kind of cool. Because
with what?
Our father carves the horns out of ebony.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think that's an interesting touch also, because he taught us how to carve, and we're, I don't know, for me it means a lot that every horn was made by my dad.
That's nice, yeah, good. And how about the fur?
The fur, we just love that fur. It kind of looks like human fur.
I mean, did you come up with that material, like as a solution
no,
to this?
No, it's an Icelandic sheep fur.
Okay.
So it's all natural. None of this has like a materials twist from me at all. But we talk about, like, in that case, the conception of it is sort of a conversation. And there's a good example of when Nikki physically makes the thing.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at. Here's some more.
These are cuter, for sure.
These are very appealing. I mean, very like Star Wars.
So it's cool. It's funny to have talked about that other one first, because what led us into making these objects in the first place was we were talking about the uncanny valley, which is, if you don't know, it's about robots actually, where there's a robot upstairs who's a good example of a robot that you want to interact with. But if you make a robot get too human-like, your empathy kind of goes up, and then as soon as it looks like a person, it goes down to, like, your empathy is like zombie level. And then if you make it cute, like give it big eyes, it goes way up to above human, which is kind of incredible. Yeah. And I was thinking
that's called the uncanny valley?
That's the uncanny valley. The valley is the zombie dip, basically, that happens. And it's true, and I actually was sort of equating it to taxidermy, which we grew up around. My mom actually loves taxidermy.
Oh, well, that explains a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I find it super creepy. Like if I'm in a room with it, I really don't like it.
Yeah.
And Nicky wanted to use this fur because he'd found it in Iceland in a gas station, and he was like, I need to use this fur. And I was like, but I think taxidermy is so creepy. And so we had this big conversation about it. And we thought, what if we don't include any facial features at all? And we're allowed to use horns, and otherwise it's just about the gesture.
Yeah.
And so that's
And then we have to fill it in as a viewer in a way, like where might the eyes...
Which is great, because that gives you space to project onto it. Then you get to have a relationship with it immediately, and I think that's kind of a special thing.
So when you, obviously in a museum context, we're not supposed to touch art, and please don't, but you sell these to private, do you, and they're so touchable, like, I mean, what do you think about that? You make them to be touched and loved? Like,
well, I mean, we started
off
making furniture, so it was supposed to be used, and I think less and less people are actually using it, but it is meant to be lived with, and if you, you know, I've heard of them getting like a tongue bath by dogs, and they're still okay.
Well, they're probably pretty durable.
They're durable, yeah. You just have to polish them up a little bit.
Right. When you mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the previous piece, you had a fight with Nicky about that. Does that happen often? Is it hard?
No, that was really the only fight we ever had.
Okay, right. Otherwise, it's smooth collaborating. You feel like?
Yeah. We really respect each other. We speak like. We're twins, so we just have a natural way of interacting with each other, and I know when he's going to do something better, and vice versa, and we just let each other run with it.
That's great.
And when we fought, I think that sort of from birth understanding faltered a little bit because we were both so overwhelmed.
Right.
And luckily, I mean, I'm really grateful that we had a fight because we're back to like. You know, even pre-career happiness.
I can't think of any other twins who produce art together that I can think of in the history of art. I'm sure there are, but musicians maybe.
It's probably some, right?
Yeah, there must be some. Oh, the Star Twins, yeah. Oh. Ooh,
I mean, if you can do it, I think it's really lucky.
Yeah.
This one. Guy.
Yeah.
Hi.
This reminds me of like a creature from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that, you know, except it's got a big heart on. So didn't see that.
This was in the same period as the other big one, and you can see like putting lips on, etc. Was a departure from what I was just talking about. And again, as soon as you start doing that, it adds an element of maybe creepy. And we were just kind of playing with how far we could push that. But it was still during this sort of turmoil period.
Do you see them as gender fluid?
Not this one, but yeah, in general. Unless it's explicit, then I think you can assign whatever gender to it you want to.
And then, so here's where we get to furniture, and a true like hybrid between sculpture and furniture.
Yeah. This one, I think we named it Anna Nicole for some reason, so it has a special place for me. I'm obsessed with her, and all of our names actually are sort of funny. So, and our idea there is, if you don't like the piece, maybe you'll at least laugh at how stupid the name is. But yeah, this was a chaise. And it has big camel feet, and it was pretty early. I can't say what year this was in, but I want to say like 2013 maybe. And this was us pushing from furniture into sculpture. So since we started as a cabinet company,
right,
we had, that was really our like basis for everything, or it was our foundation. And then
so it started functionally, like you really were making functional things, like to sell to people to live with.
Very plain, very boring, and then we just sort of let ourselves explore with it, and slowly it evolved into this. And I was always just really excited if you put an extra leg on a chair, it does something in my head. I go like, why is that there? And that's all I want to do really is create almost a visual analogy, or we like visual jokes, visual metaphors, and visual analogies, and just pushing something into where you have to start like questioning something.
I think this is interesting because it almost looks like it could be a real animal, like that you're like the llama or a yak or I don't know what, but something.
I want to meet her.
Yeah. It does feel alive.
It's really comfortable.
Yeah, I bet. And are the horns ebony? Those horns?
Sorry?
Are the horns ebony?
They're ebony, yeah.
Your dad
so my dad
those?
carved those also.
Nice. Oh, and then I love this one because this is like a herd,
This-
and this is like tour de force.
This was awesome.
Because then this also uses everything, but it's got metal. It's got does this have the hexagonal tiles?
Yes, so the table is made from individual hexagonal tiles. They're all like 3/4 of an inch. They're not very big, and they look like a sort of a generic hex tile bathroom floor, except they are made out of solid brass, and we hammer each one of them into a shape to sort of fit onto a surface, and then grind them and miter them.
That's just insane.
Oh,
yeah.
it's nuts.
It
It
is
takes
insane.
like 20, 30 minutes to do one tile.
Yeah.
And what's great is that you don't see that they're tiles unless you get up
they're
close
flush.
to it. Yeah.
There's no grout. Yeah.
So it's like, why don't you just cast it in bronze? And no, I actually really love the confusion there. And I like that that process is in particular is about Nikki doing something very quick and then spending forever on cladding it.
So the shape he comes up with quickly, the table
he
shape.
just sculpts it very quickly, and then we apply my process to it, and it's like, I don't know why I like that so much, but I just really, really like it. And with this set, we wanted to have a dining table that looks, that's being used whether someone's at it or not. So the animals are all eating at it. It's very inviting.
I want to have a dinner party at this table.
I know, it would be
Oh my
fun.
goodness.
And also just considering the human element of having dinner I hope that it's fun or that jokes are made, and that there's good icebreakers, and really like if I sit down, I hope that it's a crazy table like this so that I immediately have something to talk about. Or I can talk to the chair across from me.
How did you come up again with how you make the tiles form to the curved surface?
Yeah.
'Cause that's like it seems like a technical tour de
It's
force to me.
super hard.
Yeah.
So, and actually,
And I've actually felt one of these in your studio with stool, and I was like kind of amazed by the whole.
they're
because
pretty
it's so
crazy.
smooth, but you could see the the shape.
and we really don't make very many of these because they take so long.
I can imagine.
And I used to make them all by myself. Like this was, I don't know why I was doing this. I would actually wake up in my bed and have patinaed sheets, like I had been sweating out brass, which is terrible, because I was grinding them all the time.
Wow.
But I studied some blacksmithing at school, so I was kind of good at forming metal. And I was obsessed with hexagons because they don't like to bend. They're the most efficient. I think you get the most surface area with the least outer area. Does that
Okay.
make sense? Of any regular
I'm not good
shape.
at math, but yeah.
And it's also the most rigid of any regular shaped grid. And bees use them, I think this is why bees use hexagons,
yeah.
because there's less wax and more space inside.
They're very efficient. in that
Yeah,
sense,
they're efficient shapes, so I'm like all about them.
Right.
And
Did you just discover that by reading about?
yeah, I was like
geometry and stuff?
Googling
Yeah.
hexagons, and I read that they don't like, that the grids can't bend, and I was like, I'm gonna bend some hexagons. And so it turns out to be really hard. And,
You did it.
Yeah, and so I basically, we have a system where you take a piece of paper and kind of draw where you think it's going to go, and then you hammer it until it fits. And you'll never find.
So a lot of it's like done on like while you're making the piece, like just
All of
the
it is
literal
done.
the hammering of the
It's
thing
all
to
done
make
that
it
way.
fit together.
You start with one, and you have to move in
Right,
concentric
right.
circles
Right,
out from that one.
right,
If you
right,
move
right.
two together, there
Right.
will never be a good
Right,
seam.
right.
It literally has to like grow over the surface. And there are never any that are below, except on very early pieces. I don't like squares in it, so no squares. Pentagon is okay. And then and like 7, sometimes 8-sided pieces are okay.
Okay. Oh, I love this one too, because this
Yeah.
one's like more table than animal, but it's still
Yeah.
very animal.
So this is, we made this at Anderson Ranch, I think, in Aspen.
What kind of wood is it?
It's walnut.
Okay.
And it is, it's all hand-carved walnut.
Did Nicky carve it himself?
Yeah, so same visual language without that process on it. Again, just kind of like goofy stances. Actually, the stools I sit on them sometimes and fall over. They're not really good for that.
Is that right? Okay.
But just the feet of the chairs are feet, but they look like Smurf feet. And again,
these really
just
do
kind of
feel animated.
cute, and yeah, exactly.
They absolutely do. To
That's
me,
the whole
which is
point, and
sort
that's
of
really my
the
brother's
magic.
talent. Is like
Yeah.
I could never reach that. I try, and I never am able to make something feel like.
But Nicky can do it. That's
Yes,
That's his
exactly.
ability. It's great. I love this. This is amazing. Yeah. I want this tub for sure.
I love this thing.
Of the house.
This is wild. So we go to Portugal. We have to find the exact piece of stone. We always use.
Is that a single piece of stone?
Yeah.
I guess it has to be, right?
I
Is
mean,
marble?
I think it's marble.
It's a big
It's
block of
Pele
marble?
de Tigre, which is it comes from our friend has a quarry there actually that is super deep and really amazing, and it all has this. We love this stone because the grain continues through the form,
right.
and I love to see what character the stone had originally. If it's all white, you don't get to see that anymore.
And there's a bit of a surprise because you don't know what vein you're going to uncover, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
you can kind of get it from looking from the outside of the block, but you're not really sure. And this is in the formal series is something we call Zoidberg, which is based on Dr. Zoidberg from the cartoon show Futurama.
Okay.
Because he has like little.
Oh, okay. Don't know that one.
We watched it as kids and we're obsessed with it. And really, like, it's about feeling the stone. So when you walk up to this thing, you kind of have to touch it, and those knobs are very. The scale is very touchable.
Right.
And the stone is also, it's honed. We never polish it, so it has
it's
kind
not
of a
super
skin.
smooth, yeah.
It feels a little like skin, which is it's very sensual. And we just, stone was our first medium, so we kind of started going back to that and seeing how we would do it differently.
It reminds me, now that I'm looking at it, it reminds me of that famous photograph by Harold Edgerton of the milk shop that
Yeah,
pops
it's like
up
a little
milk
droplet.
crown. It's so interesting. But it's totally
But
hard.
weirder.
And then this is a totally different
Yeah.
category. This is Dr. Seuss to me.
Very.
Yeah.
So also growing up in Texas, roadkill was a big theme.
Yeah.
And
Taxidermy and roadkill. Yeah.
And I wanted to make roadkill of extinct, extinct animal pelts. I don't know. But again, wacky. The one that's not an extinct animal is the rainbow zebra, which is it's based on the fruit stripe gum zebra.
Yeah.
So it was like we hunted the fruit stripe gum zebra.
And these are actual rugs that you can walk on, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they're meant to be used.
You can put it on the wall or on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all it's hand knotted. They're Nepalese, and we went to Nepal and worked on them there. And so it's a dodo, a thylacine, some kind of cat whose name I don't remember that's extinct, and a mammoth, and then the fruit stripe zebra.
Why don't you talk a bit about your collaborations? Because you've done it with these and you did it with the beadwork.
Yeah.
Maybe we can. I'm going to find the beadwork.
Okay.
Because I want to get to that. There's a good example
yeah,
of a
you
close-up of that technique where you can see how they hug the surface in that insane
Exactly.
way. It's really amazing. Here's beadwork, right?
Yes.
So that's your current obsession.
Yeah, and that's been going on for a while now. So we went to Cape Town and we're just walking around a design fair, and we met a collective that does beadwork, and they were really cool.
Did you go to Cape Town specifically to look for people to?
No, we
work
went
with,
to
or?
do a talk actually. So
Okay.
and then we just were wandering around. And when I went in, I was like, wow, these pieces are, they take probably just as long as our work does, and they're animals, and they're incredible. Actually, one of the pieces that was in there was this many-horned antelope thing from Princess Mononoke, and I recognized that, and I was like, wow, it's crazy. This weird cultural reference has shown up in like a traditional craft. And I just love craft so much, and I think that beadwork is one that gets overlooked really often. I think basket weaving is another one. Any kind of hand-done weaving gets really overlooked, so I get super excited about getting to dive into something like that. So we asked if they would want to work with us, and spent 6 months going back and forth with them, going back and forth to Cape Town, working closely with them. They taught me how to bead. We would all draw together.
What does it mean if they teach you how to bead? Like, what's the actual, what does that, does it mean you're stringing little glass beads on a string?
Yeah,
literally?
one by one.
One by one, okay.
They use a chain stitch that has like 2 or 3 beads on it, and they're all
Mm-hmm.
next to each other. There's many ways to do it, but it's incredible. Their method is super expressive, and it was exciting for us. We hadn't used much color until this, and they sort of like introduced us to color, and it's the 2 of us and then a group of 25 women,
Mm-hmm.
and we showed this collection at the Cooper Hewitt, and it was the idea was to do transgressive design, and for us it's obviously not functional, but we would take these mushrooms and call them umbrellas, for example, in order to get them into a design fair. So
Right, that's great.
or if you call that thing a toy,
Right.
then it has a function. So that's something we play with too.
Right.
But this was a really life-changing project, and it's gotten me completely obsessed with beads. And we still are doing it. Actually, we're going to be showing some new works like this in September in New York, which I'm excited for. But also, it just changed our lives because we'd never gone to somewhere like Cape Town. It's a really intense place. There's a lot of sad things happening. We thought that the way they were making money was not great, like the amount of money they made for the pieces that took as long and were as great as ours. They were not making nearly as much, and so we set up a whole profit-sharing system, and it's a completely different kind of. For us, it was like a kind of an experiment in how to do business, also, because I think it's important that makers get credit, because I'm not the only one who makes my work, and B, are paid really well for it. So this was kind of our first step in that direction.
So the collaboration was like you felt like you were taking they were helping you like move your own work with their tradition that they
completely.
infused you with.
Yeah. I mean, it was equally us and them as far as the aesthetic goes.
Right.
And you wouldn't have no idea which part came from whom, and I think that that's kind of awesome. And when we showed this at the Cooper Hewitt, it was just a list of all of our names. Like, it wasn't the
Right.
Haas Brothers.
Right.
So, I mean, now it kind of happens, though I wish that it was just that list. And so that was something that we were sort of experimenting with. And we've actually now taken this, because I became so obsessed with beads, we're doing a really similar project in Central California, where I go and teach beadwork to women in farming communities where work is pretty scarce, for women in particular. And so I teach them beading, and then we start working together, and we have a whole collection of that coming out also.
That's great. So I imagine it brings me to the point of art and craft and the difference or not difference. And I imagine you don't care, and you probably don't see a difference. You know.
I don't care,
Yeah.
except for how people categorize
Right.
them.
Yeah.
I don't like that there's a hierarchy there.
Right.
And that's something that started for me when I was at RISD and I was studying painting, that that a portrait is somehow above a still life.
Right.
That a history painting is
Yeah,
really
well,
special.
yeah.
When I found them so boring.
I think we're done with that. Hopefully we're done with that. Yeah.
But that's like a natural. That's
It's
sort
still,
of something that
it
people
is art.
do.
It is art history to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I never was into that. I don't think drawings are any less than a painting.
Right.
And I don't really think that something you live with, like design, is somehow less than a piece of art either. It's just how much do you focus on function or not. And I think craft gets the real, gets kicked to the side all the time, when in truth, it's sort of why we're here. I mean, without baskets and pottery,
Right.
we wouldn't be here.
Right.
So I think it's part of, and without technology,
Well, and
that's so
functional
designed.
things have always been the carriers of art. I
Yeah.
think it's just part of human culture. As soon as they made up something to make something to cook with.
Yeah.
They decorated it with a line or
Yeah,
something.
maybe
so-
there's not an emotional impact when you see it, but for me there is when I see design works. There's an emotional
Right.
impact, and I think the two go hand in hand. They're super important. Craft is really, to me, like the most important one.
Well, it's interesting because people will talk about high art. You talk about a great painter or something having a great craft. You
Yeah.
have great technique, and it's not a dirty word in that instance. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's not. I think people, they create those boundaries themselves in their heads. So
Definitely.
like they do a lot of things. But.
Yeah, and like, I'm sure it's easy to fetishize a painter sitting alone and doing
Right,
his thing, and
right.
I get that, but that's not the only way to
But
make
there
art.
are many painters
Yeah.
and many famous artists in art history who had huge studios, and
Yeah.
art's always been about production and business in many cultures. Not
Exactly.
every culture, but.
And I mean, I might be wrong about the exact origins of this, but I think about beads and how they were an abacus. That's basically a calculator.
Right,
That's
right,
beads.
right.
Beads were they were currency at one point.
Right.
I think that the Jacquard loom was like the earliest computer. I'm sure I'm wrong about that fact, but I know that it's a very early computer. So weaving was actually like a form of computing.
It's a mind-body connection. It's what your hands can do with a material. and
Yeah,
how your
exactly.
mind manipulates that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you all
guys.
for coming.